Okay, I'm live. I need the link. Where's the link?
But right now, whatever you're doing, I'm able to see what you're doing. So why wasn't it working? Why wasn't it working with the sandbox thing?
No idea, but I'm gonna.
Could you go back to sandbox things to see if it's working now?
Yeah. Hold on a sec. I'm gonna paste the link in the Discord channel, anyways. If anyone else wants to watch it this way. I highly recommend trying it this way, just once to see if it's better. If not, then it'll be there anyways. We need to wait anyways for Caitlin. Pardon me. I said Caitlin again. My God, that's embarrassing. We need to wait for the rest of them to get back. But can you see my mouse okay? Can you hear my audio? Oh wait. Oh, I'm back again. Did it stop sharing?
Let me check. I can hear you.
Whenever it says live, Jordan, that's when you're sharing. You're not sharing.
Can y'all do me a favor and follow the YouTube link I just pasted in the WDL29 here in Discord. Let me know if the audio is working. Oh, it says the stream is still running. We just paused the preview. Oh, well. Well, we got it here on YouTube anyways. So that'll be another way to do it. Yes. Yeah, okay. Is it just me watching? Oh. That's right. Okay, so when I click the WDL29 to post a message there, I move to that room instead. Oh, I'm clicking on the audio instead of the... never mind. I got this. So, yeah, whoever's watching YouTube right now, we're waiting on another member to get back. We can start now, though, if you want. It's up to MC and Pemba right now. I did take a lunch break, so... Yay. Whoever joined, don't be afraid to go ahead and send a message in either Discord or YouTube chat. I've got both windows open right now. Whoever's on YouTube right now, I'd appreciate it if you hit me up with if you can hear me on YouTube. Got some noise canceling and filtering going on right now. You know how many times I've tried to stream and the audio cut out half the time. That was embarrassing. So while we're waiting here for them to come back, we won't make the actual todoListApp. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to create a new file. And if I can figure this out, okay, it's this one. So I'm just going to create a new component here, and let's see how we do this. First thing we need to know is in React, everything is thought of as an individual little piece of our app. Ideally, it's contained within itself. And the reason we do that is to help architect our application from small individual tiny buttons to our entire view with buttons, lists, and everything. So that's why they call them components. So a functional component literally is just a function, and we're using that syntax here. So we're using import syntax. The first thing you need to understand about the entire React project, the way it's set up, is behind the scenes when you click run, React will run what's called a compiler or a transpiler, and it will take the code you write and transform it into something that the browser can understand, because the browser doesn't natively understand tags inside of your JavaScript. So when you write something like div like this, ignore the error right now, but when you write this tag here in JavaScript, JavaScript doesn't natively understand this. So what will really happen behind the background is JavaScript will turn the compiler will turn the div statement into a react.createElement call with the tag name here, and I think these are options, and then the children will be here. In this case, it's text, so hello world, and you can export that if you want to. Hold on 1 second, I'm getting a call. I will come back in a minute. Okay, we're good. Sorry about that. Okay, as I was saying, so the reason that this is important to understand that this turns into this for React newbies is whenever you call a function on an object, you have to have that object exist in the scope of your file. And the compiler is not magic. It won't automatically put React in the scope of your file. So that's why you have to do import React from, and then React. Now the error went away. And you can now say export export default react.create element, and then you can come in here and to app.js. Remember, it's not magic, so you have to import so that's why you can come in here and then do let's see, it has to be a capital E. Well, don't worry about that. That was just, I did it wrong here, but that was just to get you to understand why you had to import React. Right. Am I still live? I am not live. I am sorry about that, everyone on Discord. I should be live now. Sorry about that. You guys can go ahead and hop on if you want. So the second thing, now that we understand that why you have to import React and how it works behind the scenes, we can now say that the way we do that, you have two ways you can do it with React. One, you can create a function that returns the HTML you want inside of it, along with some text, maybe some props, and if you're really advanced, use state is an option, but I'm not going to go there. I haven't used that yet. So the thing you need to understand is a functional component is just a fancy name for a function that accepts an argument of props, which is just an object with key value pairs, and that it returns a bunch of JSX, which is HTML inside your JavaScript. And it looks something like this. You create a function. Ideally, you would want to name the file. Let me do that. You name the file. You'd name the file the same as the name of the function so that people understand what you're doing. And you don't have to give props as an argument here with the function. It's optional if you're going to be putting props on the component. Whenever you put it wherever you're putting it, you need to put that in here. So we're going to do that for an example. And then you have to return something. And I like to use parentheses here because it allows me to put my JSX on its own line here instead of starting up at the top. You have to return something. So we're going to start with returning a paragraph that says hello world. And let me go ahead and fix the import error from here. And there's another error because I didn't export that function. So where is the preview? Oh, it's here. So yeah, here we just had the example component show up as hello world because that's what I defined it. Now it looks like my code, the code editor, simplified this for me. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back. So something you also need to know is React will not allow you to have multiple children like this. It'll give you an error. You have to wrap multiple children inside of a tag. So usually we use a div for this. But you can use anything that will accept a child. Div, span, pretty much anything can accept a child at this point. So now we have a div and 3 paragraphs, and here's our functional component the way it is right now. So right now the reason we're using this example here is we're not having to keep track of anything that's changing over time. So we use functional components like this when we're doing something simple and we don't have to keep track of anything like button clicks or a list. These are really easy to use if they're just simple display components, and that's why I like using them. So second example, in a functional components, you use props like this. So they call this props, but to be honest, it's more like attributes. If you used to HTML programming, you can think of props as attributes in your head. When you put an attribute on JSX, you have to use JavaScript camel case, such as this here. We're gonna give like some dummy text, like I'm gonna call one paragraph 1 equals hello, and if you're not passing in an object or a JavaScript statement, you can just use a plain string, just like you could with HTML. If you come in here, hello will now be passed. Oh, I put it in the wrong place, pardon me. It goes here on example. You put this here, and hello is now passed on example props.paragraph1. If we go to example, props is passed in as the first argument to your function, and we call it props to help us read and understand what it is. So if we put props.paragraph1, we save it, and we go down here, our text didn't get displayed. So whenever you are putting in a value from props, state, or any kind of JavaScript variable, you have to surround it in parentheses like this. And now our string hello is here. So that's how you pass something from outside of the component to inside of the component when you're not needing to keep track of state, which is where we're going to go next. So I'm going to create a new file for the example. Here, and we're going to, this time, instead of creating a function that is our component, we're going to create a class. So inside every component, functional or otherwise, you have to import React. so that the transpiler knows, so that the transpiler has React in scope and can understand your component. You can grab component two ways. You can do import React from React. You could also do import React like this. And then you could destructure like this. Component. I think that works too. Yeah, that works. So if you do it the first way, import React from React, it will be class state example extends React.component, or in this example, it'll be class state example extends component. Which way you do it will depend on what is easier to read and understand for both yourself and whoever else comes across this file. If it makes more sense to your team that component is coming from React, then you can do like this. And after every class, you have to add a block statement, a block, which is these curly braces. And then from here, you need to know, okay, if we're using if we're using a class, usually we're going to keep track of some state. There are two ways you can do this. You can either define a constructor if you plan on adding events, event handlers in there, or you can define it here. It depends on whether or not your compiler supports it. The most compatible option is to use a constructor. So we're going to do that here. If you're keeping track of something that changes over time in React, usually what you'll do is you'll define state. But before we do that, we have to always make sure you call a function called super. And what this does is every class is basically a function inside of a function. And what super will do is it will call the constructor of the class higher up in the chain, making sure that everything is set up properly. And by enforcing this rule, no matter how many classes down the chain you are, it will always be set up right. So that's why you have to call super, so that your this property, your this keyword, will be set up right. From here, we can set up our state. From now on, since we're inside of a class, we refer to the class instance itself by the keyword this. So when I say this, that means when I create state example by doing this in my React app, I'm referring to this tag here in that context. And that's true no matter how many. It's handy to understand that the keyword this does not refer to every state example in our app, but only the current state example, i.e. this one. So that's why they say this. So from here we can declare a variable called state. and it has to be the keyword state, not keyword, it has to be called state because that's what React looks for. In this example, we're creating a list app, so it would be handy to say, well, items, whatever you want to name it that makes sense for your use case. In this case, I'm just going to call it like a list. And I'm going to give it a value of an empty array initially. It's very important that when you can, you always give your state an initial value so that if you try to call an operation on this list, you don't get errors when you first start up your app. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and add the next required thing for your React class to work. Every React class has to have the render function, and it's literally called render. And it's very similar to our functional example. So if we copy our function here like this, we paste it here, erase the props, and instead of it being called example, it needs to be called render. And since we're inside of an object, we don't need to use the function keyword. And we go here, make sure we import state example. From state example. Sorry about that. And state example is expecting a prop of paragraph 1. So we're going to go ahead and put that. So one thing to note, because we're now in a class and it's not visible here, but behind the scenes there's also this .props is being created behind the scenes when you call super. So that's why when you, because you can't call props here, props doesn't exist on a class. Instead you have to say this .props because you have to refer to the props on the class. I have to double check, make sure I did this right. It looks right. We'll get to that in a second. You'll get things like this sometimes. Oh, I did not export my component. So here I have to export my class. You can do that by doing it in line with the declaration of the class. You'll also see it more often be done like this at the end, and you say export default state example. To JavaScript, to the JavaScript compiler, they're both the same. For me, it's just less typing. Oh, there's no one watching me live right now. Well. Okay. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Well, I was getting to the point where we were going to do the list anyways. We're almost there. I know we've already been introduced to this stuff, but for people that are just watching, this is kind of important, so. I think I'm the only one watching right now. One second. Cool. Well, fine. That's okay. All right. Let's just get to the list app, because we're there anyways. We don't need this. This was just an example. Well, if you're going to do this in a to-do list, it just depends. Is your entire app the to-do list? If it is, well, we'll just follow best practice. And I'm going to create a new file. todoList.js. React. I'm going to get everything set up. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, okay. Everyone's here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. From here, I'm going to assume that you understand the basics of React, including how the compiler works, what functional components are, what classful components are, what state and props are. And we're going to go from there. So first, before we write any code, we need to understand what we're trying to do. So we're creating a list. So we know we're creating a list that will change. That's the important part. So that's why we're choosing class tier. So we're gonna, from that we're gonna drive that we're gonna need state here. So we're gonna have to build a constructor. And we're gonna have to call super first. We're gonna create our state.
Wait, Jordan, is this live? Like you're doing this right now?
Live on YouTube.
Okay. Sweet. But wait, I'm seeing you type on Discord.
Yeah, live both on Discord and on YouTube at the same time.
Wow. Somebody say innovative. Okay. All right, keep going.
Yeah, I sent the video out, a video link. That'll be the link you'll go to refer to later. It's public.
Sweet. Thank you. I'm gonna keep watching right now, though.
Okay. From here, we know that we're gonna have a list. We're just gonna call it list. And we have to give it a default value to prevent errors later. It's best practice. We're not quite sure if we're going to need event handlers yet. Spoiler alert, we are. But from here, we're just working top down. So the first thing we're going to need to do is, we finished our constructor. So the first thing we're going to do is create a render function. And we're going to return something, because we have to do that in order to confirm that it's working. So, not like this, sorry. We're gonna do a div because we're gonna have multiple parents. Wow, I don't like that. That is not what I wanted. Pardon me, I saved too early. Okay. And we're going to just insert a random piece of text. That oh, that's right. Cool. So we're going to go here, make sure that we've exported our class. Default just means it has no name. And we're going to change these exports, pardon me, imports here. We're just going to import, and we have to give it a name. It's called todoList. Not this. Import todoList from todoList. Delete these because we're not doing this anymore. So we call our to-do list like this because we're not using children. Here is our to-do list, hello world. Okay, so we're good here. We have a class that has a state of list, and we're good here. From here, we know that we're building a list, so we need to think conceptually, is this going to be an ordered list? Is the order important? No, probably not. So, well, actually, you know what? It's a to-do list, so the order is important. So we're going to go ahead and use an ordered list, which is an OL tag. From here, we know that the list is going to have any number of items. Those are used li tags. Let's see. I'll refresh this. Cool. So we've got, don't mind the styling right now, we've got this over here. So we know we're going to have a couple of items. You know, ignore that they're the same. The important part is just the structure right now. So we're going to need a list with a couple of items, and we're going to need a way for the user to add items to the list, because that's the whole point of this. So depending on how you want to do it, I tend to group my input fields, I'm going to use an input field and a button. So I group them together with a div to make them easier to style. So we're going to create an input field with the type of text. If you don't put the type of text, that's fine. That's the default value. We're going to also create a button. Button is not a self-closing component. Refresh that. Cool.
Hey, sorry to drop in on you kind of out of nowhere. I just wanted to check in and kind of see how things are going with the screen sharing and the audio sharing. How's it all working for you guys here?
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, everything's going good. I can see everything that he's doing perfectly.
Yeah, pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that we're looking to, you can do a thing with Discord where I think it's called Nitro. You can pay some more money and the screen sharing actually goes up in quality, and I'm planning to do that. But I was just curious as to kind of how things look right now. And even like Jordan, I can see your screen pretty clearly and your audio is coming through. So far, I'm really impressed with it. All right. Are you guys finding that, I mean, of course, maybe I just jumped in right as things are going really well. Overall, has everything just continued to stay pretty high quality?
Yeah, if you Joseph, if you absolutely need to, YouTube live streaming is free and they do high quality stuff. You don't have to pay them if you can just set up a good computer with some streaming.
Oh, cool. I appreciate the input. My thought is I would rather keep everyone in one app rather than having everyone need to bounce around. And the cost isn't too high. And honestly, like, I mean, that's on Dev Mountain to make sure that we have the right facilities in place.
Right.
And so, you know, especially given that it's not a particularly high cost, I'd rather just, you know, front the money and make sure that people don't have to bounce out of here, and it can be like even higher quality than it is. But I really appreciate that insight, Jordan.
Yeah, I was just trying to save you a couple $1,000s.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I don't think it'll be anywhere near that. But yeah, that's totally fine. Also, I know there's only 3 of you here, but while we're talking, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your patience, you know, and your efforts. I know that this last week has been completely head spinning in the the only consistency has been change of direction, and I totally understand the frustration there. You know, as we've definitely been kind of playing it by ear and trying to figure out what we're doing as we go along. So thank you so much to all 3 of you very much.
I feel like you guys are handling everything super well. I mean, obviously you have no, like, it's not your fault that there's a disease going around the world. You're just doing the best you can. And I think everybody understands that.
All right. Well, much appreciated. But like I said, I know this last week, it's, you know, basically every hour was like, all right, well, what's the new direction, you know, now? So I'm so appreciative of all of y'all. So thank you very, very much. I'll get out of your hair. I know you're right in the middle of this. So thanks so much, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. It's good to hear that the director, actually, that was the owner.
That's the owner of Dev Mountain?
The owner, the big head guy.
No, that's the director of web development.
Joseph?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the director of web development.
I thought he was like the big guy because his Slack said owner.
Oh.
He's
the owner of the Slack stuff.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was my bad. I was like, cool.
Don't be sorry.
All right. Don't worry about it. We're moving on. We're going back to our React component here.
But you're so nice.
So we were creating a React component with an input field and a button and a few list items. So the first thing we're going to need to do is handle our input field and our button. Because right now you can type whatever you want into it, but the React component doesn't know anything about what you're typing in. Same thing with the button. You can click on the button as much as you want, but it's not going to do anything because the React component, again, has no idea what's going on. So first thing we need to understand is for input fields where the user is typing something in, we want our React component to be the source of information so that we're keeping what the React component thinks is in the input field to be the same as what's being displayed on the input field. So now that we know that we need an input field and a button for this use case, we're going to have to add something to keep track of what's in the input field. So we're going to do user input is, and give that a default value. It can be called anything. It's just what makes sense for your use case. And the first thing we need to do to tie it together is to give value, and then we do this.state.user_input. That's how you get state off of this. We go back here and we type in. Oh, that didn't work. Make sure we refresh. I'm typing in the keyboard, but nothing works because the source of, they call it the source of truth. The data is actually coming from this .state and not from that anymore. So in order to update the user input, we need to add a handler function. And since this isn't a class, we don't need a function keyword. Because we're using an input field, it's pretty easy to just say that this is a keyboard event. I like naming it instead of just generally event, because then when someone goes here on a big long component file and you say handle input keyboard event, and you're like, oh yeah, they're typing on a keyboard. So in order to update something in a React component, you have to call this .setState, and you have to give it a new object. You have to give it the key you want to update, and then the value you want to update. In this case, the keyboard event is a input, so we can guarantee that event.target.value will be there. And target refers to the element which the event is happening on. In this case, the input field. If we were running this function under a different input field, it would refer to that input field instead. So now that we've created our component, our handler function, if we type into the input field, nothing happens. But that's because we haven't hooked up the input field to the event handler yet. So we have to say on change. That's the thing we use in this case. It's this.handle input. And if we type in the keyboard, nothing's going to happen. But that's because we used a plain function. And for whatever reason, the way everything is set up, you have to bind your event handlers in the constructor before they'll work when you write them this way as standard functions. So we're going to go ahead and do that.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so if you were going to deconstructure like the this.state.list or this.state.user input, where would you put that?
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet. Do you want me to take care of that while you have the question?
I'm just curious. I mean, you could do it in order, honestly. You could do whatever you want to do.
Well, you asked the question. We're going to go there. We haven't set that up yet. Are you talking about when we're displaying the list or when we're updating the list?
I guess both.
Okay. The best flow first would be to handle adding something to the list, and then we can deal with mapping.
All right, you're good. You're good. You can keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't worry about that. It's fine. So we're going to go ahead and bind the function this.handle input.
Hey, Jordan.
Yeah.
Instead of binding, could we just do the
functional? The arrow function?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also valid. It just depends on the compiler you're using. The default one will also handle that. We can do that in this case. For that.
Yeah, if you just change that handle input method to a arrow function. Yeah.
Like this. That'll work too. I'm showing the most compatible form first.
Right. I like it this way because I'm trying to get used to the arrow function. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to force myself to do that everywhere.
Yeah. I get you. So for people on YouTube, Pemba just asked me, could we use an arrow function instead? And I said, yes, it's 100% totally possible. If you do it this way, instead of doing a regular function, it should work. It'll work just fine. Like I said, it depends on the compiler you're using. In this case, the one we're using is compatible with it. It gets transpiled anyways, so we can do it that way. Whether or not you use this will depend on the project you're working on. If they're working on a really old React project, you may not be able to use this, so that's why I used the other one. As a web developer, you need to be able to use whatever tools are given to you, and you may have to change what you use depending on the situation. So now that we're out of that point, we can type into the input field, but when we click on the button, nothing happens. So we have to tell the app what we want to happen here. So we have a list, and the list is just going to be a list of strings for now. That'll be the simplest way to represent this. So we're going to have to create a handler that will handle when the user clicks on the button to add. So we have to call, we can call it anything. I'm going to call it add to list. Like this. Will be, I'm calling it mouse event because it's a click. And I'm going to call, here's the special thing with React. The philosophy is you don't change this list here directly. You have to copy the list first, then you change that list, and then you can set that to a new list. Don't know why, but that's the way it is. That's standard practice. If I could explain it, I would tell you. Other than that,
Can you explain the equals mouse event?
Yeah, so you're used to seeing it like this. This is an arrow function. I'm setting it equal to a function expression. So this is a function expression here. But when I put Control S, the linter simplifies it to no parentheses because you only have one argument. And mouse event in this context is on the button when you click on something and unclick, the type of the event will be mouse event. You're used to seeing it like that.
So is this like when you do, say we were doing vanilla JS where you would do like document.get element by ID and then you would write something like that in there? This is the same thing?
Yeah, when you would grab document.get element by ID and then you define an event handler on it.
So these are event handlers?
These are event handlers, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
That's why I'm using the type of the event and then event, so that whoever reads it says, oh, well, someone's gonna click on this button or whatever, and it's gonna be from the mouse or from the keyboard. Because
so it's like the add event listener that we were doing in vanilla JavaScript, right?
Yeah, except that it's on the actual class itself, and we're passing that into the button.
Right.
So we're doing a mix of putting it inline and defining it in JavaScript. So
that works.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll continue from there. So we don't actually necessarily need mouse event here. So we can actually just erase that because we're not going to be taking any information from it. The event will be called whether or not it's a mouse event. I just put it there for sake of explaining. So whenever the user clicks on this button here, we haven't set it yet, but what's going to happen is this function is going to run. And when it runs, we want to first copy the list. Then we want to add what's on the input field into the list. Then we want to set the state. We want to update the state with the new list. And we want to change the input field to be blank so that the user can type in something else. So we're going to start with copying the list. There are a few different ways to do it. The most common way that we've seen is something like this.state.list.splice, and that's valid.
Could you use a spread operator?
Yep, you could also do
I was about to say the same thing.
triple dot. I'm showing both ways first. I'm showing the old way and then the new way.
Thank you, Jordan.
You could also do this.state.list. And that does the same thing. It's just less typing. So now we have a copy of the list. We can do new list.push.
Could we apply the destructuring thing somewhere around here, so we don't have to keep on doing that. This dot whatever we do.
Yeah, we could do that.
I mean, I've seen it somewhere. I'm not comfortable with it, so I would like to learn, how to do that better.
Sure. So the structuring syntax is you use var, let, or const that starts the declaration of a variable. So we're going to use let because we're going to change it. Instead of a name, you're going to put curly braces. And then you're going to put the names that you expect to be on the object you're destructuring. In this case, it's going to be state. So over here on list and user input. So we're going to do list, user input, and then we're going to set that equal to this dot state. So down here, in order to use that, instead of calling this dot state dot list, we're going to do list. And then we're going to do new list dot push user input. So this grabs list user input from state and sets them to local variables by the same name inside of this function. This copies the list that was just declared up here and sets it to new list. Then we're saying add user input to new list using push. From here, we update the list by calling this dot set state. Give it an object. It's called list, so we give it the key of list. And because our new list is called new list, we're going to put that in there. And because our second task was to reset the user input field, we're going to also say user input, set that to an empty string. From here, we need to go down to our button and make sure that the event we want to run, let me start over. We want to define when we want this function to be called, and we're going to make it be called whenever the user clicks on the button. So we're going to use onClick. We're going to set that equal to, it was called add to list. So this add to list. And we won't get any display here. So where's the console? So whenever we render, I'm going to add console log this dot state dot list so that we can see what's in it. So right now, list is an empty array. If we type something in it and we click add to list, we now have our string here on the list. Now we have to deal with actually taking what is in the array and turning that into something that JSX can understand. Because if you try to just put in, well, it can do arrays. Arrays are fine. That's valid. It'll work. You just have to make sure that that it's an array. So we type something in here, we add to the list, it appears down here. If we were to go into our Chrome DevTools though, it would just be a string. Since we're formatting this in an ordered list, we have to create li tags for every item in the list. To do that, we're going to need to do a map function or a for loop, and then create a new list for React to go through that has our li tags with our values inside. We're going to do that on our render function. You can do it anywhere. You can even do it inline if you want. It's just more readable if you do it outside of the return statement. So you can call this anything, but we can do and then we're going to do this.state.list. And because we're not adding or removing values, and we're just updating the values that are there, I'm going to use map. I'm going to give it a callback value function, and it's going to have, you're used to seeing element. So we'll just do this. I'm going to use an arrow function. And the way this works is we have to return a value, and we're going to return a new array with the li elements, right? Because every list has to have an li tag inside of it. So we're going to return li, and then inside we're going to do element like this. That should be fine. I don't know if that's what it needs. Oh, sorry, I named that wrong. And now we've gone over every item in the list and placed our value inside of an li tag. You can also do that when you add it to the list. That's also valid. But, you know, it's whatever you feel is best. I don't have a reason to do it anyway else right now. So instead of this.state.list, we're going to put render list in here. And right now, it's going to be empty because we haven't defined anything. And then we do ASDF. And now you have an item. It has something else in it. I may have clicked on it twice. Yeah, I clicked on it twice. From here, if you want to define extra rules like the input field has to be empty or can only be a certain value, that would be up to you. But from here, we're pretty much done. Any questions?
You're the best, Jordan.
No problem.
We have to like present these. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, we have to present them?
Yeah, just to like Kyle, but you're trying to present yours, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much going to end up being the same anyways.
I mean, I have one that works, but I think you would be able to explain yours better.
Yeah. I mean, there are 100 different ways to do it. At the end of the day, how you do it's going to depend on the team you're working with and whatever standard they've defined and whatever your compiler supports.
All right, that works for me. So we're supposed to meet back here at 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
Yes, sir. No, 3 o'clock, buddy. Wow. That's when we're presenting. 3:30 is when we have that meeting.
Yeah. Right. So
I'll see you guys then. I'll see you guys at 3 o'clock.
Yep. See you at 3.
Yeah.
All
see you at 3. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right, for those on YouTube, we're done. So see you another time. Bye.